August 2nd, 2024. A housekeeper walks into a kitchen in Portland's West Hills and finds her employer lying in a pool of blood on the marble floor. The victim? A 57-year-old restaurant owner worth over $15 million. The prime suspect? Her 18-year-old boyfriend who'd been living in her mansion for months. But here's what nobody saw coming. This wasn't just about money. This was about obsession, control, and a relationship that shattered every rule society had written. One of them wanted love, one of them wanted escape, and one of them wanted it all to end. The question isn't just who killed Margaret Holland. The question is, was murder inevitable from the moment they met? Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will make you question everything you think you know about love, power, and the deadly price of crossing lines that should never be crossed. This is the story of Margaret Holland, 57 years old, widow, millionaire, owner of 3 successful restaurants in Portland, Oregon. And this is Nathan Brooks, 18 years old, college student, waiter, from a working-class neighborhood where people counted every dollar. Their relationship started in October 2023 and ended 10 months later with one of them dead and the other facing life in prison. But between those 2 points lies a story that divided an entire city. Was Nathan a victim of manipulation by an older woman who used her wealth to control him? Or was he a calculating killer who saw an opportunity and took it when things didn't go his way? Was Margaret a lonely widow looking for companionship, or a predator who groomed a teenager for her own needs? And here's the question that haunted investigators. When did love turn into obsession? When did gratitude turn into resentment? And when did someone in that mansion on the hill decide that murder was the only way out? Let's go back to where it all started, October 2023. Margaret Holland had been a widow for 13 months. Her husband, Robert, had died of a heart attack at age 62, leaving her alone in a 400-square-meter mansion that felt more like a tomb than a home. For 30 years, Robert had made every decision: what they ate for dinner, where they vacationed, how the business was run. Margaret had been the perfect wife, hosting dinner parties, managing the household, doing charity work. But she'd never really lived her own life. When Robert died, Margaret inherited everything. 3 Holland's Kitchen restaurants worth about $4 million, the mansion in West Hills valued at $2.5 million, investment portfolios, commercial real estate, $15.5 million total. But there was a catch. Robert's will didn't give her complete control. Major decisions had to be approved by a board of trustees made up of Robert's old business partners. It was his way of protecting the family fortune from what he called unreasonable decisions. Margaret woke up every morning at 5:47, 3 minutes before her alarm. She'd eat breakfast alone, staring at the empty chair across from her. Then she'd drive to the restaurant to check accounts and supervise staff, trying to fill the hours of a day that stretched out like an endless highway to nowhere. Every restaurant owner will tell you the same thing. The evening shift is where you see who people really are. That's when Nathan Brooks walked through the door. 18 years old, sophomore at Portland Community College studying business administration. He needed money to help his mother pay bills and to cover his tuition. Margaret noticed him on his first day. Not because he was attractive, though he was. Tall, lean, dark hair, serious eyes. She noticed him because of how he carried himself. Natural grace, confidence without arrogance, and something else. When he looked at her, he didn't see a sad widow. He saw a person. For the first time in over a year, someone asked Margaret how she was doing and actually waited for an answer. Their conversation started simple. How was the dinner rush? Did that difficult customer in table 6 ever tip? Gradually, the walls came down. Nathan talked about college, about balancing school and work, about his dreams of opening his own business someday. Margaret found herself staying at the restaurant later and later, long past when she needed to be there, just to talk to this young man who made her feel like she still had something to offer the world. November brought the first snow, and with it, a shift in their relationship. Margaret offered Nathan a ride home after his shift. He lived with his mother, Linda Brooks, in a modest neighborhood 20 minutes by bus from downtown. Small house, peeling paint, chain link fence. The contrast with Margaret's world couldn't have been more obvious. On the drive back to West Hills, Margaret felt something she hadn't felt in years: alive. December changed everything. After closing one night, they had dinner together at the restaurant, just the two of them, candlelight, wine, conversation that flowed like water. Nathan took her hand and told her she was beautiful, that she deserved to be happy. When he kissed her, Margaret didn't pull away. She kissed him back. Their first time together wasn't in her mansion, it was in a motel on the outskirts of Portland. Margaret felt ridiculous and exhilarated all at once. She was 57 years old, making love to someone who could have been her grandson. But for the first time since Robert died, she felt like a woman instead of a ghost haunting her own life. By April 2024, Nathan had officially moved into the mansion on West Hills. Officially, he was renting a room. Unofficially, he was living in a $2.5 million house with a woman who was reshaping his entire existence. Margaret set up an office for him, new computer, mahogany desk, everything he needed to succeed in school. She paid his tuition, bought him clothes from stores he'd only seen in magazines, enrolled him in a gym, Spanish lessons, bought feeder subscriptions. She was building the man she wanted him to become. Nathan felt it happening but couldn't stop it. Every gift came with an invisible string attached. Margaret never said it directly, but the message was clear. She was creating him in the image of someone worthy of her world, someone who could stand beside her at business dinners and charity events, someone who belonged. The physical relationship became a tool. Margaret was experienced, demanding, knew exactly how to give pleasure and how to withhold it. After arguments, she'd become cold, distant, unreachable until Nathan apologized and agreed with her point of view. After reconciliation, she was warm, generous, talking about their future together. But not everyone was celebrating their love story. Margaret's son, Margaret Holland, 26 years old, corporate lawyer in Seattle, saw Nathan as a threat. Derek had built his career knowing that one day he'd inherit millions. Now, some teenager was sleeping in his dead father's house, spending his mother's money and possibly working his way into the will. In May, Derek came to Portland. The meeting over dinner was tense. Derek studied Nathan with the cold calculation of a lawyer assessing an opponent. After Nathan left the room, Derek laid it out for his mother. The board of trustees was concerned. Her relationship was damaging the family's reputation. If she continued down this path, they could invoke Clause 7 of Robert's will, the clause that stripped her of control if her behavior threatened the family's interests. Margaret refused to back down. For 30 years, she'd lived by Robert's rules. Now, for the first time, she was making her own choices. Nathan became a symbol of her independence, her refusal to be controlled. Meanwhile, Nathan's mother was facing her own crisis. Linda Brooks worked as a social worker in Portland. Her job required an impeccable reputation. When word got out that her son was living with a wealthy woman 40 years older, Linda's professional world started crumbling. Colleagues whispered, supervisors questioned her judgment, her church community asked uncomfortable questions. In May, Linda confronted her son at a coffee shop. She begged him to come home to end this relationship before it destroyed both their lives. But Nathan couldn't explain what his mother would never understand. With Margaret, he felt important, valued. She consulted him on business decisions, talked about making him a partner after graduation, showed him a future where he was more than just a kid from a working-class neighborhood. If you're still watching, drop a comment with your state. Let's see where everyone's watching from. Are you Team Margaret or Team Nathan? Let me know. By June 2024, the pressure was building from all sides. Margaret received an offer to sell one of her restaurants for $1.5 million. She discussed it with Nathan as an equal partner, showing him the financial documents, asking his opinion. For an 18-year-old who'd been making minimum wage a year earlier, this was intoxicating. But there was a problem. The sale required approval from the board of trustees, and Derek was systematically convincing every member that his mother's judgment was compromised. July brought the heat, and with it, a crisis that would change everything. July 8th. Derek arrived from Seattle without warning. He came with a thick folder of evidence: private investigator photos, email transcripts, financial records. He'd been building a case against his own mother. The ultimatum was simple: end the relationship with Nathan immediately, or lose control of everything Robert had built. Margaret had 1 week to decide. That evening, Margaret told Nathan the full truth about the family fortune for the first time: $15.5 million. Nathan tried to process numbers that seemed abstract, unreal, but he also understood something else. He'd become the center of a financial war, and his presence in Margaret's life could cost her everything. The next day, Linda arrived at the mansion. It was the first time she'd seen where her son had been living. The opulence stunned her. This house was worth more than she'd earn in 10 lifetimes. The confrontation between the two women was inevitable. Linda made her case. Nathan was 18, too young to understand what he was giving up, too inexperienced to see how this relationship was warping his future. Margaret refused to budge. Nathan was an adult making his own choices. But Linda had one final card to play. She threatened to go to the police, to claim that Margaret had started the relationship before Nathan turned 18, to accuse her of corruption of a minor. It was a bluff. Linda had no evidence, but the threat hung in the air like poison gas. In mid-July, everything accelerated. Derek hired a private investigator who followed Nathan everywhere. Every conversation with his mother, every trip to campus, every coffee with a friend was photographed and added to Derek's growing case file. Nathan received an official letter from Derek's law firm: cease all contact with Margaret Holland immediately, or face legal action for fraud and extortion. Derek was using corporate law as a weapon to terrorize an 18-year-old. Linda received her own letter threatening conspiracy charges, and at work she got a final ultimatum: resolve the family situation within 1 week or lose her job. 15 years of service meant nothing compared to the scandal. By the end of July, Nathan was trapped. Living with Margaret meant his mother would lose her job and he'd be branded as a gold digger who destroyed a family. Leaving Margaret meant returning to his old life with no prospects, no education fund, no future. On August 1st, Margaret received devastating news. The Board of Trustees was scheduled to meet the next day. One item on the agenda: strip her of control over the family assets. That afternoon, Margaret made a decision. She called her attorney and told him she wanted to change her will. 50% of everything to Nathan. $7.5 million. It was her way of protecting their relationship, of showing Nathan that she was serious about their future. August 2nd, 2024, 8:30 in the morning. The housekeeper, Maria Gonzalez, walked into the kitchen of the West Hills mansion and found Margaret Holland's body on the marble floor. Blood pooled around her head. A shattered crystal decanter lay nearby. The blow to the back of the skull had been fatal. Margaret died instantly, never knowing who killed her. Detective Rita Morales arrived at 9:15, 42 years old, 15 years on the force, 7 in homicide. She walked through the mansion taking notes. No forced entry, alarm disabled from the inside. No signs of robbery, jewelry untouched, cash in the safe, electronics in place. This wasn't a random crime. This was personal. The list of suspects was short but compelling. Nathan Brooks, the young boyfriend with financial motives. He'd been living in the house. He'd been promised millions in a new will. Derek Holland, the son who stood to inherit everything if his mother died before changing her will. He'd threatened her. He'd hired investigators. He had 15 million reasons to want her dead. Linda Brooks, the mother who'd threatened Margaret, who'd watched her son's life spiral out of control, who was about to lose her job because of this relationship. Detective Morales started with Nathan. He was found at Portland Community College taking a microeconomics exam. When told about Margaret's death, he seemed genuinely shocked, but Morales had been a detective long enough to know that shock could be performed. The interrogation revealed the first crack in Nathan's story. He claimed he'd gone to bed at 11 p.m., heard the TV on downstairs, left for school at 7 a.m. without checking on Margaret. He had no alibi for the time of death, estimated between 11:30 p.m. and 12:30 a.m. Derek's alibi seems solid. He'd been in Seattle, working late, dinner with colleagues at an upscale restaurant, receipts, witnesses. But Seattle was only a 4-hour drive from Portland, theoretically possible to make the trip, commit murder, and return. Linda had no real alibi either. She claimed she was home watching TV, but neighbors couldn't confirm she'd stayed in all night. For 3 days, Morales worked the case. Then came the breakthrough. Bank records showed Margaret had withdrawn $50,000 in cash on July 31st. Phone records showed a 43-minute call to her attorney's office that same day. Margaret had been planning to change her will, leaving half of everything to Nathan. But then came the critical piece of evidence, a handwritten note found torn up in Nathan's wastebasket. Forensic technicians reconstructed it piece by piece. The note was from Margaret, written the night she died. Nathan, I've changed my mind. Meeting with Derek showed me that my choice is destroying our family. Tomorrow, I will tell the board I'm ending our relationship. You'll receive $100,000 and help getting into a good university in another state. It's best for both of us. Margaret. $7.5 million reduced to $100,000 and a bus ticket out of town. Morales brought Nathan back in for questioning. This time, she had him trapped. She showed him the note, showed him his internet search history from the night of the murder, Washington state inheritance law, timing of inheritance, tax implications of large inheritals. She showed him forensic evidence, blood traces on the garden path behind the house, burned clothing in the outdoor barbecue, fragments that matched what Nathan had been wearing.
If you're still watching, drop a comment with your state. Let's see where everyone's watching from and hit the like button. Nathan broke. Not immediately, not all at once, but piece by piece the story came out. He'd gone downstairs at 11:45 p.m. intending to talk to Margaret, to convince her to change her mind, to fight for the future she'd promised him. Margaret was standing by the kitchen window looking out at the garden, her back to him. When he spoke, she didn't even turn around. She just said, "The decision is made, Nathan. Tomorrow you're moving in with your mother." Something inside him snapped. Not rage, not hatred, just a sudden, overwhelming understanding that everything he'd become over the past year was about to disappear. The clothes, the house, the education, the future, the version of himself that felt important and valued, all of it evaporating because Margaret had decided she was done playing. The crystal decanter was on the counter. Robert's souvenir from Ireland. Nathan picked it up. He didn't plan it, didn't think about it, just lifted it and brought it down on the back of Margaret's head with every ounce of strength in his body. The sound, Nathan said later, was what haunted him. Not a crack, more like something soft collapsing. Margaret dropped without a sound. Nathan stood there for maybe 30 seconds, the decanter still in his hand, watching blood spread across the white marble like stilled wine. Then survival instinct kicked in. He went upstairs, found the note Margaret had left on his desk, tore it into tiny pieces, stripped off his blood-stained clothes, went out the French doors into the garden and burned everything in the barbecue. Came back inside, took a shower, got into bed. In the morning, he got up at 6:30, dressed in clean clothes, made coffee in the kitchen where Margaret's body lay just feet away behind the island. He stepped around the blood, grabbed his backpack, drove to campus for his exam, sat in a classroom calculating economic models while police were securing the crime scene in the house he'd just left. The confession was recorded, every word, every detail. Nathan's lawyer tried to stop him, but it was too late. At 4:30 p.m. on August 5th, Nathan Brooks was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The trial in October was almost anticlimactic. The defense argued psychological manipulation, that Margaret had groomed Nathan, controlled him, made him financially dependent, then discarded him.
The prosecution argued cold-blooded murder for money, that Nathan killed Margaret when he found out he was losing access to millions. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty. First-degree murder with aggravating circumstances. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. At 18 years old, Nathan Brooks's life was over. Linda sold her house and moved to live with her sister in Idaho. She didn't visit her son in prison for 2 years, couldn't look at what he'd become. Derek sold the restaurant business to a California chain, put the mansion on the market, though it took months to find a buyer. Nobody wanted to live in a murder house.
Here's what the trial didn't reveal, what Detective Morales discovered 2 years later while reviewing the case files. On July 31st, the day Margaret wrote that note ending the relationship, she made 3 phone calls. One to her attorney about the will, one to Derek telling him she'd made her decision and was ending things with Nathan, and one more call to a number that took Morales weeks to trace. It belonged to a private investigator, not the one Derek had hired, a different one. Margaret had hired her own investigator to look into Nathan's background. What the investigator found was buried in files that never made it to trial. Nathan's mother, Linda, wasn't just a social worker. She'd been sanctioned twice for ethical violations, helping clients access benefits they weren't entitled to. Nothing criminal, but enough to show a pattern of bending rules. And Nathan? Before meeting Margaret, he'd worked at 2 other restaurants. Both times he'd been fired, once for stealing from the tip jar, once for inappropriate relationships with customers. Small infractions that never went anywhere but painted a picture. Margaret's investigator had delivered the report on July 30th. Margaret read it that night, realized the young man she'd fallen in love with had a history of using people, of finding opportunities and exploiting them. The note she wrote wasn't just about protecting her family, it was about protecting herself from someone she'd finally seen clearly. But here's the thing that'll keep you up at night. On August 1st, the day Margaret died, there was one more person in that house. The investigator Margaret had hired. She'd come by at 10 p.m. to deliver additional findings, photos of Nathan with his ex-girlfriend, talking about how he'd found a rich woman to take care of him. The investigator left at 10:30 p.m., half an hour before the murder. She saw Nathan come downstairs while she was leaving, made eye contact with him in the hallway. She told police about this later, but it didn't matter. Nathan had already confessed. But it raised a question that nobody could answer. If Nathan knew someone had just delivered evidence of his con to Margaret, did he go downstairs intending to talk his way out of it? Or did he go downstairs knowing there was only one way to make the evidence disappear? Detective Morales believes Nathan went to that kitchen planning to kill Margaret, that the confession about it being spontaneous was one more lie in a relationship built on lies from both sides. Margaret lied to herself about why she wanted Nathan, not love, loneliness, and ego, and the need to prove she could still attract someone young and vital. Nathan lied to Margaret about his feelings, not love, opportunity and ambition, and the seductive pull of a life he'd never dreamed possible. And both of them lied about what they were building, not a future, a transaction that could only end one way.
Nathan Brooks is serving life at the Oregon State Penitentiary. He's refused every interview request, every book deal, every documentary filmmaker who wanted to tell his story. He studies law by correspondence, files appeal after appeal, all of them denied. Linda Brooks works at a grocery store in Idaho. She finally visited her son in prison in 2020. They spoke for 20 minutes through glass. She hasn't been back since. Derek sold everything and moved to California. The Holland name in Portland is associated with scandal, tragedy, the price of breaking society's rules. The mansion on West Hills was finally sold. The new owners gutted the kitchen where Margaret died, replaced every surface, every fixture. But the neighbors still call it the Holland House. Some stories don't wash away with new paint. So here's my question for you. Was this murder inevitable, or could it have ended differently if even one person had made a different choice? Was Margaret a victim or a manipulator who got what she deserved? Was Nathan a killer or a kid who got in over his head and panicked? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know what you think, because this story isn't just about murder. It's about power, control, and what happens when two people use each other until one of them decides the cost is too high.